For next 2 hours, we will gain insight, knowledge sharing, and experiences regarding technological and statistical literacy for the 21st century. In this webinar, may I kindly remind you to value your respect and courtesy at most during our webinar session. Today's webinar is the second of 3 series webinars held by Universitas Negeri Malang and University of Canberra, and also part of series agenda to welcome the 67th anniversary of Universitas Negeri Malang. Without further ado, I would like to invite the Executive Dean of Faculty of Education, University of Canberra, Professor Bernie Delgarno, to deliver welcoming speech and officially open this webinar. The distinguished Professor Bernie Delgarno, the time is yours.
I think you use this one for now.
Just need to mute. Yeah. Oh, sorry. You're muted already. Now, thank you very much. We are just getting our technologies working here. Now, perhaps if you could give me a thumbs up to let me know if you can hear me.
Yes, we can.
Yes, we can hear you.
Thank you very much. So I'd like to welcome everybody here today. Selamat pagi, good morning, and really thank everyone for coming at this difficult time. I really do acknowledge the COVID challenges that are being felt by all of us, but particularly in Indonesia at this current point in time. So I think it's, I really appreciate that people have been able to find the time to come along and participate in the webinar despite those difficult challenges. So I'm Barney Delgarno, I'm Executive Dean of the Faculty of Education, and with me is Serie Padahunan, who has been the instigator of this series of webinars. And I'd like to hand over, I'd like to just mention also that we'll say a little bit more about this later, but we're going to mention the prizes for the 3-minute presentation at the next webinar, but we'll do that later on in the session. But what I'd like to do now is to hand over to Serie, who will introduce our presenters.
Everyone, good afternoon from Canberra and good morning for Indonesia. First of all, I would like to check if all the speakers are already here. So Badrun, Emily, Christina, and Barney. It is a great pleasure for me to introduce all our distinguished speakers. First, Professor Barney Delgarno, our Executive Dean of Faculty of Education. His expertise in education technology. I think you can easily find who is Barney through typing the name in Google, and it will give you lots of information about him. So we are very, very fortunate having him in his very busy time to actually present something that are very, very relevant for COVID context or Indonesian context. And also we will have Christina Lomach. Thank you so much. It's at night time in America, and she's very busy, but she also provide or have opportunity to join us to present something that we also really need about the use of technology in teaching and learning. And we have also Emily Ashcroft, a very expert teacher. We are very lucky having her here. She's a lecturer at our faculty, and also she's a PhD candidate. So she is going to present her very beautiful project working in the area of STEM for early learners, anak usia dini, okay? And then we also have our PhD student in Indonesia and Australia awardee, penerima beasiswa Australia, Badrun Kurnia, and he has a very, very exciting research project about statistical literacy. So he will share to us about his study. All right, without further ado, I would like to, and myself, I will also present something that actually it took me time to go for a walk for more than 10,000 steps to think really carefully what I really want you to gain from my presentation. So hopefully we will have a very valuable time. Thank you everyone for joining us, and let me invite Professor Barney Delgado to present. Okay, and I am going to share the PowerPoint from here.
Thank you. Now you can show the Indonesian version.
Oh yeah, yes, I am going to show the Indonesian version. Okay, let me give let me share the Indonesian. Yeah, this one.
So Siti and her team have translated the slides of my presentation, I think some of the others, into Persian. And I have a copy in front of me in English.
Yeah. Okay, so this is the slide.
Now, how do you share that?
I am going to share it just because I don't have two screen. Let me just do it from here.
But how do you present it in Zoom?
Slides. Okay, from start. And then share it through Zoom. This one. And then what is the share icon? It's hidden somewhere.
Share screen should be in the middle there.
Yeah.
Now, are you connected as a presenter on the computer?
Yes.
So maybe just minimize that panel there. Just go there and then share screen.
Okay.
There.
Yeah. So look at the
Yeah.
point. Excellent.
Thank you for your patience. I think we now have the slides being shared. So my presentation, I have to apologise for changing the title very slightly from the original title. So the title of my presentation is Teaching in Polysynchronous Learning Environments. And part of what I'm going to describe is what I actually mean by polysynchronous learning environments. In the context of COVID, many people across the globe have had to very quickly move from face-to-face teaching to remote teaching and learning. And depending on the technologies available to the teacher and to the students, sometimes that has involved a range of different technologies. Usually, a part of that is self-paced learning resources, but those resources can be delivered online or in print. Usually there's some kind of asynchronous communication, and that can be through email or through text discussion forums, for example, but also text messages. And finally, there is often a degree of synchronous teaching, And often that can be through web conferencing, but of course it can equally be through the telephone. And in Australia, we've certainly seen all of these kind of technologies during COVID. In fact, I really have been amazed and astounded at teachers' ability all over the world to very quickly adapt to a completely different way of teaching. And their ability to take what they do know of technology and apply that to the online teaching technologies, which have often been very new to them, and apply their face-to-face pedagogies in order to do that. As we move in and out of lockdowns, as we have areas where we can return to face-to-face teaching, we'll often end up having some students who are able to be there face-to-face and some students who need to still be coming in from their home location. And so this idea of actually providing a blended experience where some students are face-to-face and some are online, I think will be with us for quite some time. In fact, I actually think that even once we are all vaccinated and the pandemic is gone, a lot of people will expect to have those opportunities to be able to join learning experiences from anywhere rather than have to go back to face as they did before. So I want to talk a bit about this, what does it mean to teach in this kind of blended way? Now, one particular thing to think about in relation to remote teaching is the different kinds of interaction that occur. And Moore, who's one of the kind of early researchers in distance education, refers to three types of interaction. Interaction between the learner and the teacher, interaction between learners and other learners, and interactions between learners and content. And these three kinds of interaction can occur face-to-face. They can occur online through synchronous technologies such as web conferencing, and they can occur online through asynchronous technologies such as email, discussion forums, and so on. So it gives you a kind of a space of kind of 9 different cells that are the different kinds of interaction applied in those different kind of modalities. And if you have a look at the kind of different technologies that we might use when we're doing that, it kind of helps you to understand what I mean when I'm talking about those different kind of communication modalities and the different kinds of interaction. And you can see how, a lot of the kind of web conferencing technologies now include the ability to do learner-teacher, learner-learner, and learner-content interaction. So we're starting to see a kind of convergence, but often you'll use a number of different technologies as part of your engagement with students. So a couple of scenarios that I'd like to kind of discuss. And the first one is the notion of delivering a lecture, which might have a whole lot of people present, like the picture here, but it could also have very few people present and most of them remote, depending on the state of the pandemic at the time. And then at the same time as we've got that face-to-face presence, we've got some kind of remote presence, which can be the delivery of the textual information, the engagement with students in different ways, and sometimes also the video. Now, a typical situation in that scenario is a combination of audio, video, chat messages, shared screens, presentations, and sometimes also student presentations. We also have remote and face-to-face participants who have a similar kind of interactive opportunity, but often using a different modality. So face-to-face students can put up their hand and talk and ask a question, while remote students might do it similarly, or they may use a text chat mechanism to ask a question. A really critical difference here, though, is that we have multiple channels of communication. So in a typical face-to-face environment, there's really only one audio stream. And so either the teacher is talking or one of the students are talking. When we have these kind of blended modalities, we can often have a couple of different asking a question at once using a text messaging tool while the teacher is talking. And so we have these multiple channels of communication. Additionally, we will often record the session. And this actually allows a person who isn't present synchronously to engage later. So this is where the synchronous becomes asynchronous. And if we also have an asynchronous discussion forum, it actually allows a person who's not present to comment on the recorded lecture and engage in a conversation with people who have been present at the time. So it actually brings together the students who are present with those who are engaging after the fact. Now, the second scenario is one with shared engagement with content, often similar technologies, but the notion of students who are present and remote at once engaging with content. Now, that can be through presenting information, but it can also be through them engaging with some kind of an interactive simulation, or sometimes just being asked a question and everybody answers that question using some kind of a polling tool, and everybody can see how many people answered option A, option B, option C, and the teacher can then identify misconceptions and resolve those misconceptions. And so the notion that the students are engaged in the content and they're not engaged passively, but they're actually actively answering questions and seeing each other's answers. So what are the kind of key changes across those two scenarios? Well, first of all, multiple streams of interaction, which can mean increased student engagement in the session because students don't have to wait for their own 30-second share of the time. They can actually ask a question when that question comes to them, and the teacher can then answer that question when they have a moment to do that. But also, the peers of that student can also answer questions. So you can actually have students engaging in a conversation about the content at the same time as the lecture is being delivered. The recording of sessions means that we can have engagement continuing beyond the session. And the opportunity to engage in shared interaction with content means that we can engage in cooperative learning, peer support, and feedback. So we also have that greater degree of engagement than we have in a kind of a passive receipt of a lecture. And finally, we can have synchronous responses to asynchronous communication. So the notion that a person who listens to the recording later posts a message, and a student who just happens to be standing at a bus stop or looking at their phone can immediately respond synchronously, so the asynchronous can become synchronous. So I have co-opted and adapted the term polysynchronous learning to refer to this kind of scenario. And I define it as the integration of learner-learner, learner content, and learner-teacher interaction through a blending of multiple channels of face-to-face, asynchronous online, and synchronous online communication. And I've used this diagram to show the different kinds of interaction and the different communication modalities. And the circle in the middle is intended to convey the notion that what happens as a result of all of these different interactions is something quite different to the sum of the parts. So just a couple of take-home messages and just a couple of risks to consider. So does that say first take-home message? That's the first one there. So the first one is that the integration of multiple streams of synchronous and asynchronous activities, including activities involving learner-learner, learner-teacher, and learner content interaction, can result in a learning experience that is qualitatively different than the sum of the component parts. I'm just re-emphasising that. And the second take-home message is that polysynchronous learning activities, if well-designed, can potentially have a major positive impact on learner engagement and consequently learning outcomes. They can be equally valuable for students coming in remotely, but also for students on campus, because the students who are actually physically there, if they have a device, they also have access to those multiple channels of communication. So they're having a different experience to what they normally would have had face-to-face, as well as the opportunity for the remote students to come in. So just a couple of risks or challenges to kind of leave you with. This is challenging for teachers because it's a completely different kind of learning experience for the students, and the cognitive load for the teacher can potentially be much higher because you've got to be aware of all of the different communication streams and also a range of different technologies. If not well designed and delivered, the learning experience can be complex, disruptive, or chaotic. The challenges include the fact that the design of the learning activities that allow students to focus on the content rather than the technology is not simple. And if the students don't have the technology skills, they can end up focusing too much on the technology and not enough on the actual learning. So you've got to really think carefully about the design. The teacher familiarity with the technology and the style of delivery is really important. And the physical learning space also presents some challenges because we need to have audio streams that allow everybody remote and everybody present to be able to communicate with each other. So that's the end of my time, and I think we'll have an opportunity for discussion at the end of the presentations. So I'll hand it back to Siti to...
Thank you very much, Barney. Before I invite Christina to present, I just want to say hello to everyone, to all the committee. I haven't said hello to them at the beginning of the meeting. Bapak Dekan, the Dean of FMIPA, yang saya hormati, teman-teman yang discussant, professor who are going to also who are going to respond the presentation, Profesor Ashari dan teman-teman. Saya akan mempersilahkan nantinya setelah semua presentasi dari UC diselesaikan. Alright, so now let me hand over to Christina. Okay, let me show. Thank you for reminding me. So you can see the complexity of technology here. So
that's right, we're all experiencing it, aren't we?
We are all experiences. I came here 30 minutes before that, but sometimes unexpected always happens. So this is a good lesson, okay? The application of this technology integration. Okay, so Christina, I think Christina will share her own screen.
City, I think we had Emily second. Is that right?
Oh, Emily. Oh, okay. In my notes is.
Oh, well, yes, it is Emily second.
Yeah. So Emily. So my apologies. Okay, Emily. Thank you. Over to you.
I wasn't sure who was going. Are you able to? Hold on. Share my screen.
We can see you.
Just making sure you can.
And we can hear you.
Wonderful. I'll just share now and hopefully present. Can you see my slides now?
Excellent. Perfect.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for having me. I apologize for the sun hitting me right in that spot. But thank you for coming today. Today I'm going to be talking about a STEM practice framework, and that in relation to a model called the Experience, Represent, Apply model. And hopefully by the end, all those terms will make sense for you. So first of all, what do I mean when I'm talking about STEM? So traditionally, STEM comes from the acronym meaning science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. But there's been an ongoing debate whether it might be STEAM, including the arts. I've seen it as STREAM, including reading and the arts, STEM with medicine as well added on, or even STEM, so adding social sciences. But one of the dilemmas with this debate about the acronyms and the subjects within STEM is that it keeps the focus on the subject-specific knowledge rather than looking at what is it that brings these subjects together? What are the commonalities and why were they put together in the first place? So the Office of the Chief Scientist also talked about this changing in the meaning of STEM. And they said that STEM seeks to provide frameworks in which new problems can be tackled. So we're starting to see this shift in the literature away from STEM as an acronym and more towards STEM as this reform initiative and this bigger concept and framework and almost an umbrella term. Which leads us into STEM practices. So STEM practices is a framework developed by Early Learning STEM Australia. And what it does is looks at the commonalities and the ideas and methods and values that are similar across all STEM subjects rather than focusing on the content of maths or content of science. So it's an adaptation from the practice architectures of approach from Chemist et al. So where Chemist et al. Offered sayings, doings and relatings, this STEM practices framework offers ideas, methods and values. So you can see from the image there, some of the ideas might be that we're problem finding, proposing ideas, exploring and challenging. And I'm sure you can start to see how these are terms that could be used across mathematics or science or any of these content areas. Methods, we want our students to be generating ideas. We want them to be using appropriate language and vocabulary, again, regardless of that content area. And same with the values. What are values that are core to STEM practices? Are we curious? Are we having students who show and demonstrate creativity? And what these STEM practices do is that it enables teachers to connect STEM to real world problems and scenarios and situations rather than relying on that disciplinary content. And it gives us more diverse representations of that. So this STEM practices framework was designed for early childhood educators in the hopes of providing a design that's still rigorous, but provides a strong theoretical structure for approaching STEM in early years. One dilemma about creating a framework like this, though, is helping teachers to implement this in the classroom. So to complement this STEM practices framework, ELSA also developed the experience, represent, apply model. And you can see there right in the centre, that STEM practices is still at the core of what we're doing. So this ERA model, experience, represent, apply, is on the premise that it's cyclical in nature and that children first will experience a range of play-based off-app activities, and it's really that foundation of what they already know about something, a concept, whether it might be patterning or sorting, and really getting that foundation for their conceptual development. Then based on that as a springboard, children will then begin to represent their understanding of STEM in really diverse range. And in this particular case, through representations on app. So in my next slide, I'm going to be showing you what those apps look like, but they're targeted and specifically designed for students in early childhood settings to be showing their understanding in diverse ways. And then building on that representation is we're then giving opportunities for our students to apply their learning and build on their learning in new situations and challenge them and increase the sophistication of their understanding off app again, and that real play-based foundation of that. So when I'm speaking of the apps, these are the 4 apps that were designed for Early Learning STEM Australia, again, ELSA. You can see that apps 1 and 2 are situated and focused on spatial reasoning. We know that spatial reasoning is a strong indicator of STEM success in later years, and also logical reasoning. Sorry, I'll just turn off the laser pointer. It provides a framework to represent those understandings for educators. And there's also an educator app and a families app as well. So the educator app helps providing some professional learning for educators on how they can use that ERA model in the classroom as well. And again, these apps are designed specifically for that represent section of the ERA model. It's not the only way students can represent their understanding, but they are designed for that. So today I'm going to just walk you through a quick example of what that ERA could actually look like in the classroom. And this example is an example that's outlined in Lowry and Larkin paper that you can access. And we're going to be focusing on app 1, patterns and relationships, specifically the second app, our second activity within the app called lunch boxes, which is based around sorting. So in this example, first of all, students were experiencing sorting of objects. So we can see that it's already exploring what children already know. In this example, it was often based on one attribute that children would sort something. In the top picture, you can see that the children are sorting by colour. And in the second image B there, you can see that the child is sorting his sticks by size. And it gives educators a foundation of what our students already know. From here, students moved on to representing their understanding on app. So this app was a lunchbox activity sorting. In the middle of the lunch box activity, you can see this tray. It was a range of foods that would just replenish. There was no end to the amount of foods that would appear on the app, and then students would sort the app based on whatever attribute they would choose. So you can see students that might have just picked one item and just gone with it. We can see someone might have chosen a colour as an attribute to sort, or we can see fruit. A part of this app also you can see on the right-hand side is something called user-generated content. This is where students would have to record their voice, and they would need to explain why it is that they've chosen to sort these objects together. For example, one student actually put the apple and the corn together in the lunchbox. And at first you might say, oh, I wonder why they did that. But their justification was both of those items have cores. So an apple core or a corn cob core. So something quite outside the box thinking for a 4-year-old. So there are no incorrect or correct responses. It's a very open-ended way for students to represent their understanding and then orally recording their thinking. This app can also be played by one child at a time, up to 4. You can see here there are 3 children on the app. So there are 3 lunch boxes that can be sorted into. Following the representation, we then move into applying, and this is where we want our students to apply these concepts in more challenging ways than what's previously presented in the experience or the represent phase. So this example here, we can see in image A, these children at the back here are actually taking photographs of the sorting that they've already done, because another activity in this app is around patterning, and they'll be able to use their image that they've created as a user-generated content in a patterning activity. And in the bottom here, we can see that students are starting to sort objects in much more complex ways. We're looking at more than one attribute at a time here. So it might be size and shape as well as color. So we can see the complexity being scaffolded through this ERA, that students are really increasing the sophistication of their learning. So to summarize some key points, the STEM practices framework really provides a framework for early childhood educators to explore these STEM concepts through ideas, methods and values, rather than the focus being on subject specific disciplines. And the ERA model, the experience, represent, apply, supports educators to enact this in the classroom and giving them a foundation for that planning and experience. And I believe that's my 10 minutes up.
Thank you very much, Emily. So this is a very trend topic in Indonesia about STEM, and really Emily presented to us about STEM practices. How can early learners learn about STEM? And Emily shared her research. All right, and the next one is Christina. Let's invite Christina from America.
Thank you, Serie. Can you see my screen?
Thank you.
Yep, we can see you and we can see your screen. Perfect.
There we go. And can you hear me as well?
Yes, it's perfect.
Perfect. Thank you. So, hi everyone. I'm Dr. Christina Lamach, as Serie said. I'm going to be talking about technologies in educational research, which I think is very apt for the current timing. We're seeing the use of technologies at all ages, from young children, as Emily was talking about, interacting with STEM apps, all the way through adults at university using a variety of tools, as Barney described. As a result, researchers like myself want to be able to examine these technologies and their roles in education. There's quite a few ways that we can do that. Let's see here. Oh, sorry, I didn't advance my slide there. There we go. There's quite a few different ways that we can do that when we have technologies. There's many different data sources as we get into technology. For my talk, I'll focus on 2 ways that you can use technology to gather data on technology. So using tech to examine tech. And I'll also share a framework around how students interact with and teachers use technology in educational contexts that might be useful for those of you that are wanting to research further into the impact of technology in the classroom. So first, let's talk about back-end data or log data. This is one way that we can collect data where we actually have the technology itself collect data on the user's experience. It's recorded by the technology. A very simple example of this is a video game that keeps track of your score over time. It's logging your progress as you go through the game. We've seen this in a lot of different learning management systems. And in education, we really like to see learners' progression through various levels as they're interacting with whatever technology we're having them work with. This can be achieved through program features that record their learners' interactions and hopefully displays those logs in some way. Now, this data can often be varied. So we sometimes see things such as if a learner is correct or incorrect, we might see whether or not they have how fast or slow they performed an action, how accurate their responses were, or just what kind of interactions that they're having. So are they creating something? Are they interacting? Are they playing and making something collaboratively in the STEM apps? Are they working with colleagues in an asynchronous format or polysynchronous format in Barney's talk as well? What that means is that we want to be able to consider what we're doing with this large data and how can we collect it. So as it comes in, it's often useful to have this data when you have a large number of learners or a large number of interactions that you want to examine. So for example, in the lecture hall scenario where you have lots of students that are interacting, or for example, in ELSA, there are thousands of children who have played the STEM apps. And in those apps, we actually collect data on what children can do, the I can statements. And this allows us as researchers and educators to see what children can demonstrate while playing the apps. The aggregation of this actually also lets us look at trends of what children can do in a large variety of contexts. So there's children across Australia interacting with this particular program. And because we have detailed data, it can be interpreted in a consistent and meaningful way. So we've been able to discover not only results about what the children can do, but how they are doing it, how they're accessing the technologies. One caveat that I'll kind of share, just with some experience with this type of data, is this often requires data experience in terms of manipulation. So it's usually coming in on the thousands and hundreds of thousands of rows of data coming into a database of some variety. So having some experience or having some resources where you can actually pull in some of that data can be very useful. Second part would be visualization. So maybe you're not on that quite large scale, but you still have lots of interactions of some variety. I recommend making some form of visualization to help you start to parse through what type of data that you have. For example, the bar graph on the screen shows how thousands of children have interacted with I can statements on the ELSA apps over across 16 different activities. This includes even small changes like children being able to first copy a pattern, then extend a pattern and create their own pattern. As a researcher, we need to be able to make meaning out of this and pull some of those activities together. So I think Emily was talking about lunch boxes and how some children were sorting things different ways. Some of the I can statements are captured there. Some of them don't actually capture that nuanced understanding of how an apple and I believe it was a corn cob, both had a core. So that's something to consider, which is nice when we get into the second method that you might consider collecting data about technology, because oftentimes actually accessing backend or log data is not always possible. Some programs are starting to allow educators to use it, but not always. If you haven't designed it yourself, or if the developer didn't add a way for you to access data, you need to get to the data in a different manner. So one way may be to set up video recorders of your learner using the technology. Now, we've had standard video recorded interviews for quite a while, but something that I would suggest is what you can see in the picture here. In this picture, you can see a child playing a math game on a tablet while wearing a chest-mounted GoPro camera. And the advantage of the camera is that it actually lets you see the child's hands as they're interacting with the app. Oftentimes, if you're recording something overhead, you can't actually see what's going on, it's obscured. And this way you can see some of those different hesitations as they interact with different pieces. They move towards something that they think should be one answer versus the other. In the study that this child was in, we actually did have a second camera as well. And this setup allowed us to see her face. We were able to see some of her interactions and her positive and negative affect as she was interacting with it. So this two video method was used in a study of preschool children interacting with math apps on a tablet. Because of the two perspectives, we were able to gather data which we would not have had captured just on the back end data. So thinking of our current COVID times, we can definitely get a lot of that log data through our learning management systems, but it's also valuable to have the in-person see what's going on data as well. But it could be video recorded, maybe so where you don't have to be in person still, which could be useful to continue research. In this particular example on the left, you can see that we have base 10 blocks app where the child was supposed to drag blocks slowly one by one to create a target number, which in this case was 5. And then as they move the numbers along, it would count with them. And what we are seeing there is they hear 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. When they reach the target number of 5, then the app would make a sparkle animation. However, when the children were interacting with this, some were so excited about getting to use technology, they would go very quickly. So they go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And they would create the number along the way. So the app would correctly say, oh, you did it. You made 5 somewhere in there. But the child would still get the positive reinforcement, but the app did not keep up. So this is an example of where having that video perspective gives an extra piece of, while the backend data would have said you got a correct answer, the video data showed what was actually going on and how there might be a misalignment between what the technology is recording and what is actually happening in person. A similar example is this app on the right. It's a math game where you're looking at a number line called Motion Math Zoom. And the idea is that the child is supposed to zoom in and out to get to a target number. This had a feature where there was a timer trying to encourage efficient strategies. And because of that timer, some children actually got anxious. And instead of using a more efficient strategy, they reverted to a less efficient strategy where they were just scrolling along instead of zooming in and out. We wouldn't have captured that behavior had we not had the extra video over the top and being able to see what they were responding to. So that's something to consider. Now, in a perfect world, of course, we would have both the video data and the log data side by side. So sometimes this can happen. The study that I did, I was actually designing the app as well as creating the study that went along with it. So in the first phase, I was able to design the app. And what you can see here is on the left is the GoPro video showing the interactions of the app. So somebody's interacting, they're playing the app live. And on the right, you can see the actual, what the data looked like in terms of the log. So each dot was an interaction with that. And what this allowed me to do was to be able to see, okay, as these people are interacting, what is happening? Are they doing well? Are they struggling with just the technology? Is there a technology issue, or are they struggling with the concept? How can we vary this and improve either the speed, the difficulty, or the technical affordances to change and then improve their learning? And the last little bit that I wanted to share here, which I promised I'd share a framework. I think this is a very useful one, especially now as we have a lot of time where we're teaching digitally. And this one centers around technology use in educational contexts. It's a great help if you're trying to examine teachers' use of technologies, but also if you're trying to frame in your mind the purpose of a technology in the classroom. So this is the PIC-RAT model developed by Kimmons, Graham, and West. This model considers both the students and the teacher's perspective and how the technology is being implemented. Along the vertical axis, you can see 3 different levels of how students might relate to technology. Are they being passive, just as you probably are right now, listening along? Are they being interactive by answering questions or completing a challenge? Or are they being creative, constructing something totally new? Along the horizontal axis, you have the teacher component, where we see how teachers might be using technology compared to their traditional practices. Are they using something as a replacement, much like this webinar is replacing a face-to-face talk? Is it an amplification, allowing them to do something more efficiently or effectively than without the technology? Or is it possibly a transformative experience with a previously inconceivable outcome without the aid of technology? The purpose of the matrix is to allow for reflection on the use of technology and to encourage meaningful technology integration. No particular coordinate of the matrix is bad. It just helps you be more aware of how you're interacting with the technologies in your classroom. So hopefully these 2 different ways to look at data on technology and this framework to kind of think about how and why you're using technology in the classroom are a little bit helpful to everyone. I've got a list of some of the relevant papers that go with the studies that I was showing for the young children, as well as the app studies. And thank you all for your time listening. Hopefully I was within time there. I forgot to put a timer, City.
Thank you very much, Christina. We have more framework to really think or to really consider in the integration of technology into the classroom. And this is really needed, like as Professor Dalgarno told us about the situation right now, it might continue. So this is very helpful. Thank you so much. Then let me invite the next one, which is quite different. It is not really about technology, but about statistic literacy. Mas Badrun, are you ready to share with us?
Yes, let me share my screen. Oke. Bisa nggak dilihat layar saya? Halo?
Okay.
Let's go.
Bisa, Pak, bisa.
Bisa dilihat kan layarnya, Ibu? Dan
Iya,
Pak,
bisa, bisa, Pak.
Oke. Oke. Terima kasih. Thank you for the opportunity given to me to present in 10 minutes about studies that I'm conducting. I will present in Indonesia, jadi saya akan menyampaikan dalam bahasa Indonesia. Oke. Judul dari presentasi ini adalah Examining the Statistical Literacy of High School Students. Nanti dalam presentasi saya akan menggunakan istilah literasi statistik sebagai pengganti dari statistical literasi. Oke, kita tahu bahwa pada zaman sekarang teknologi bukanlah hal yang asing bagi siswa, dan dengan teknologi ini siswa dapat terkoneksi langsung dengan internet, dan oleh karenanya mereka akan sering berinteraksi dengan informasi yang terkait data, terlebih lagi pada saat pandemi COVID-19 ini. Siswa mungkin akan sering menjumpai informasi seperti kenaikan jumlah kasus positif dari hari ke hari, atau data tentang berapa yang sembuh dan berapa yang meninggal, pun juga mungkin penyebaran COVID-19 dari satu tempat ke tempat yang lain. Dan untuk memahami semua informasi ini diperlukan yang namanya literasi statistik. Namun bagaimana literasi statistik dari siswa Indonesia? Untuk menjawabnya, kita mungkin bisa melihat laporan dari PISA yang fokus pada items yang mengakses siswa tentang uncertainty dan data. Kenapa kita pilih PISA? Alasan lainnya adalah karena mungkin terbatasnya studi yang dilakukan di Indonesia terkait topik ini, dan jika pun ada, tidak dalam skala besar. Nah, berikut adalah hasil dari PISA 2003 dan 2012 yang fokus ke sebaran siswa Indonesia, kemampuan mereka dalam merespon informasi yang terkait sama data. Nah, perlu diketahui di awal bahwa PISA ada 6 level yang diberlakukan. Mungkin untuk membacanya saya fokus ke sini. Jadi 6 level dibagi menjadi 2. Kita fokus ke garis yang saya buat di 0%. Di sebelah kanan itu adalah level 2, 3, 4, 5, dan 6. Sementara di sebelah kiri ada level 1 dan ada level tambahan, yaitu level di bawah level 1. Dan kita bisa lihat selama 1 dekade, mulai 2003 dan 2012, siswa Indonesia yang berumur sekitar 15 tahun, mungkin bisa kita samakan dengan kelas 9 SMP, mempunyai kemampuan yang sangat rendah sekali dalam merespon soal yang menggunakan data. Karena mereka berada sekitar 70%, tidak ada banyak perubahan, berada di level 1 dan di bawah level 1. Lantas bagaimana kemampuan mereka setelah 1 dekade? Dari 2012. Nah, sayang sekali secara resmi bisa menunda pelaksanaannya, seharusnya tahun ini ditunda sampai tahun depan. Jadi kita harus menunggu, semoga Indonesia partisipasi sehingga kita bisa tahu hasil dari siswa kita dalam merespon informasi yang terkait data. Harapannya lebih bagus dari 1 dekade atau 2 dekade yang lalu. Nah, dari hasil PISA ini, apa sih yang sebenarnya ingin digali lebih dalam lagi? Nah, saya kepikiran bahwa kayaknya strategi mereka perlu digali lebih dalam. Bagaimana cara mereka merespon, apa yang mereka pikirkan. Dan dari hasil yang cukup rendah ini, timbul kekhawatiran. Kira-kira siswa di akhir sekolah, yaitu kelas 12, bagaimana kemampuan literasi statistik mereka? Apakah mereka lebih baik dari kelas 9? Ataukah mereka sama? Siapkah mereka setelah lulus untuk berpartisipasi secara aktif di masyarakat untuk menjadi warga yang terinformasikan tentang data? Nah, oleh karena itu saya lakukan penelitian yang fokusnya adalah qualitative cross-sectional assessment. Ada 2 pertanyaan atau rumusan masalah yang ingin saya temukan. Yang pertama terkait tentang level literasi statistik mereka. Dan yang kedua adalah tentang strategi mereka dalam merespon soal-soal yang menggunakan data. Dan untuk 2 rumusan masalah ini nanti akan dilihat bagaimana kelas 9 dan bagaimana kelas 12 untuk dilihat perbedaan atau kemajuan atau yang terkait respon mereka. Oleh karenanya, perlu saya definisikan terlebih dahulu apa literasi statistik yang saya maksud dalam penelitian ini dan level yang saya gunakan. Banyak sekali definisi yang beredar di sana, namun untuk penelitian ini saya fokus dari sudut pandang siswa sebagai pengkonsumsi data, bukan pembuat data. Nah, sebagai pengkonsumsi data diharapkan mereka dapat menginterpretasi, mereka dapat mengkomunikasikan, mereka dapat mengevaluasi, dan mereka dapat menggunakan data untuk mengambil keputusan. Tentunya ini dipengaruhi oleh beberapa komponen yang berkontribusi pada literasi statistik siswa. 3 komponen tersebut adalah pemahaman siswa akan konteks, pemahaman mereka bagaimana cara membaca data yang disajikan dalam sebuah representasi, ataupun pengetahuan mereka tentang statistik dan matematika itu sendiri. Hasil dari respon siswa nanti akan dikategorikan, saya pinjam atau saya kembangkan 6 level dari Watson sama Cunningham. Level yang paling rendah adalah idiosyncratic, sementara yang paling tinggi adalah critical mathematical. Data saya ambil dari 2 kota, di Jombang dan di Surabaya. Ada 96 siswa yang dilibatkan. dari 16 sekolah yang berbeda sebaran sekolahnya seperti yang terlihat di tabel. 24 siswa dari 96 ini diambil untuk diwawancarai lebih lanjut untuk ditanya seputar strategi mereka dalam merespon informasi terkait data. Nah, setelah data terkumpul, bagaimanakah cara menjawab rumusan masalah yang pertama yang fokus untuk mencari level literasi statistik siswa? Ada 3 proses besar yang saya lakukan, yaitu group coding, individual coding, sama consensus coding. Di grup coding ada 3 coders yang duduk bersama, menyamakan persepsi, dan mereka bersama-sama untuk mencari level yang paling sesuai untuk 24 anak yang diwawancarai. Nah, setelah kita sama satu persepsi, selanjutnya masing-masing dari coder ini melakukan coding mencari level yang paling sesuai untuk 72 siswa yang sisanya. Nah, jika hasilnya kita rekap yang berbeda, maka kita lanjutkan diskusikan pada konsensus coding. Di sini kita bermusyawarah kira-kira level yang paling sesuai untuk anak yang kita levelkan berbeda itu berapa. Dan hasilnya seperti yang terlihat di sini. Jadi di sini terlihat bahwa ternyata di year 9 atau kelas 9 ini masih banyak anak yang berada di level 3, yaitu inkonsisten. Dan ada ternyata kelas 9 yang berada di level 2 informal. Jadi mereka secara informal merespon informasi-informasi yang menggunakan data. Nah, tapi ternyata juga ada yang lumayan proporsional di kelas 4 dengan level 3, maaf di level 4 dengan yang di level 3. Di sana anak sudah mulai paham tentang informasi dan merespon tapi belum kritikal. Nah, di kelas 9 masih sedikit yang ternyata berada di level 5. Bagaimana dengan yang kelas 12? Ternyata mayoritas berada di level 4. Saya bisa katakan cukuplah mereka memahami informasi yang terkait sama statistik, tetapi tidak ada kritis-kritisnya. Nah, dan di sana ternyata syukurlah ada lebih banyak yang sudah mencapai level kritikal, tapi sayang sekali masih ada yang di bawah, yaitu di level 3. Nah, dari kedua ini ternyata baik kelas 9 ataupun kelas 12 belum ada yang mencapai level 6, yaitu critical matematikal yang paling tinggi. Lantas bagaimana dengan data interview? Saya akan gunakan salah satu contoh di sini item yang saya gunakan untuk mengukur kemampuan siswa dalam mengambil keputusan. Item ini saya kembangkan dari salah satu jurnal dan ternyata juga ada di salah satu buku teks matematika kelas 8. Nah, ini bercerita tentang lari 100 meter, ada 3 pelari, ada 7 lomba di mana waktu dari mereka diukur, dicatat di dalam tabel, dan tugas dari siswa adalah memilih satu pelari yang layak untuk maju ke pertandingan berikutnya. Dan siswa juga disuruh untuk menyampaikan cara-cara mereka. Nah, saya melakukan pengembangan dengan membuat waktunya semakin lebih sulit sedikit dari versi aslinya. Lantas bagaimanakah kira-kira strategi siswa dalam menyelesaikan soal ini? Saya tidak bisa sajikan semuanya. Di sini ada 2 siswa yang saya jadikan contoh di level 3. Nampak siswa di kelas 9 ini tidak menggunakan data langsung yang ada di tabel untuk membuat keputusan. Siswa ini justru membuat representasi yang lain, yaitu diagram garis. Tapi sayang sekali ternyata dengan pemahaman konteks yang kurang, akhirnya diagram garisnya dibuat seperti ini dengan asumsi yang paling banyak, semakin banyak waktu yang dibutuhkan adalah semakin baik. Nah, di sini berarti ada kesalahan dalam memahami konteks lari, di mana semakin sedikit semakin baik. Akhirnya anak ini salah dalam beberapa hal, sehingga keputusan siapa pelari yang layak maju berikutnya itu diputuskan dia yang mempunyai tren naik. Sementara kelas 12 ada yang memakai rata-rata. Nah, anak ini sebenarnya bagus menggunakan rata-rata untuk memilih. Akan tetapi ada sedikit kesalahan dalam menghitung rata-rata yang basicnya sebenarnya tidak mungkin masalah, kesalahan sedikit itu. Yang paling fatal adalah anak ini tetap tidak paham konteks, di mana setelah ketemu rata-ratanya, justru rata-rata yang paling besar yang dipilihlah sebagai pelari yang terbaik untuk berkompetisi di berikutnya. Seperti yang terlihat di sini adalah terbaik karena yang paling besar. Oke, jadi di sini terlihat ternyata ada strategi yang berbeda dari anak dan masih dalam proses untuk 24 anak yang lain, sehingga nanti polanya bisa terlihat lebih jelas bagaimana kelas 9 dan strategi apa yang ada di kelas 12. Mungkin itu saja dari saya. Terima kasih. Saya sampaikan.
Terima kasih banyak, Mas Badrun.
Terima kasih.
Terima kasih. Sebelum saya menyerahkan kepada discussion, maka sekarang giliran saya ya untuk menyajikan PowerPoint saya. So I have two mouse here. So let me. So what I am doing is actually share the screen from this computer. Yeah, it is share and just share this one, I guess. Am I right?
Try that, yeah, and then do that, and then
we'll go to this one.
and then, yeah. Perfect.
Yeah. Okay, teman-teman, I am going to speak bahasa Indonesia, so my slides are in English. All right. So when our speaker present in English, so we try to provide you with Indonesian slides. So the title of my presentation is really about the affordances. Oh, switch code. Sometimes I wanted to speak English, but Indonesia, but my brain asked me to speak English. Okay, let me try to speak bahasa Indonesia. Penelitian saya atau presentasi saya itu berkaitan dengan potensi sosial media untuk pengembangan guru. Oke. Ini susunan penyajian saya. Pertama, saya ingin memperjelas apa tujuan yang saya harapkan dicapai oleh teman-teman pendengar di akhir presentasi saya. Kemudian ada 3 alasan utama mengapa tujuan itu penting. Dan yang terakhir adalah setelah itu lantas apa? Setelah mendengar Bu Siti, apa dong yang perlu saya lakukan? Nah, itu struktur dari sajian saya. Saya perlu membatasi karena sosial media itu banyak, tetapi penelitian saya selalu menggunakan Facebook atau Facebook Group. Namun hasil penelitian ini tentu sangat relevan dengan sosial media yang lain. Oke, nah ini dia tujuan saya. Saya berharap setelah presentasi saya teman-teman semakin jelas atau lebih paham lagi bahwa sosial media itu sesungguhnya bisa menjadi medium pengembangan guru. Dan lantas apa nanti yang perlu kita lakukan setelah ini? 3 alasan utama mengapa ini pentingnya. Pertama, dari sisi data. Oke, dari sisi data, penggunaan Facebook itu sangat luas di Indonesia, mudah diakses, membuat kita terkoneksi antar sekolah, antar pulau, antar provinsi. Banyak sekali informasi. Coba kalau kita lihat statistiknya di sana, Indonesia itu adalah top 3 in the world in terms of Facebook user, ya, pengguna ketiga tertinggi, dan bahkan ini sangat didukung oleh ketersediaan mobile phone atau smartphone. Kita lihat in Indonesia in 2021, it is really about 210 million of mobile users. Imagine that. In Indonesia, it's common to have more than 1 mobile phone. Okay. Kemudian alasan yang kedua adalah alasan dari research. Apa sebenarnya yang kita dapatkan dari penelitian-penelitian yang ada? Ada banyak sekali systematic literatur review yang mereview ratusan studi tentang penggunaan Facebook dalam pendidikan, dan juga banyak empirical studies, jadi studi-studi yang berbasis empiris. ada dua pola yang ingin saya katakan di sini. Pertama adalah bahwa studi tersebut menunjukkan adanya peluang, tetapi sekaligus tantangan dari penggunaan sosial media dalam bidang pendidikan, termasuk di dalam pengembangan guru. Nah, hal yang lain di sini adalah hal yang lain juga adalah bahwa dari sistematik literatur review yang ada ataupun studi empiris itu menunjukkan bahwa ada gap di sana, kita perlu memahami bagaimana sih caranya supaya bisa menggunakan Facebook itu sedemikian sehingga manfaatnya jauh lebih besar daripada kelemahannya ya. Nah, ini adalah contoh-contoh literatur review yang bisa diakses oleh teman-teman kalau mau lihat, ternyata banyak sekali loh penelitian tentang Facebook dalam bidang pendidikan, sedangkan di Indonesia itu betapa banyak pengguna Facebook, ya kan? Kemudian hal yang terakhir adalah alasan ketiga adalah alasan dari penelitian saya sendiri. Sorry Barney, alasan penelitian saya sendiri. Yang selalu saya lakukan adalah bagaimana caranya sebenarnya untuk mengoptimalkan potensi dari sosial media untuk pembelajaran, untuk alat belajar. Dan saya menggunakan sejumlah teori di dalam menganalisis. Antara lain adalah salah satu studi yang saya publikasi yaitu tentang community practice. Bagaimana sebenarnya kita berinteraksi di Facebook sedemikian sehingga terjadi pembelajaran. Karena bisa saja itu kan buang-buang waktu di Facebook itu. Ya enggak? Kemudian hal yang lain juga karakteristik dari professional development yang efektif. Ini bagian dari S3 saya yang sebenarnya melihat bagaimana ciri khusus yang perlu dimunculkan atau perlu dipertimbangkan ketika membantu guru di dalam pengembangan profesinya. Dan satu hal lagi yaitu tentang distributed leadership. Distributed leadership, this is the one that I really wanted to understand better, because then how can we use this kind of leadership to actually optimize the affordances of social media for teacher professional learning? Ya. Kemudian, nah, lantas apa? Saya ingin sebenarnya di slide ini, saya mau mengatakan kepada teman-teman ya, dengan situasi COVID-19, kita kan semakin bergantung pada digital, penggunaan sosial media semakin banyak. Tetapi dari pengalaman maupun dari bacaan saya tentang literatur review, saya mau memberikan satu signal pada teman-teman, satu icon ya, simbolik tentang traffic light. Maksud saya begini, ketika kita berFacebook, kita perlulah dengan menggunakan lampu merah, kita perlu stop begitu. Sebenarnya apa yang saya lakukan di Facebook? Apakah saya belajar sesuatu atau saya membelajarkan orang lain? Demikian juga saya memberikan lampu kuning. Lampu kuning artinya apa? Kita diminta untuk berpikir lagi, rethink about whatever we do through social media. Jadi memikirkan dan bertanya. Sehingga kalau kita yakin bahwa khususnya di masa COVID ini, di mana gap semakin besar, yang kaya semakin kaya, yang miskin semakin miskin, saatnya untuk setiap individu di komunitas itu melakukan kontribusi. Nah, dengan lampu hijau ini kita yakin apa yang bisa kita share di Facebook, apa yang kita bisa menstimulus pembelajaran yang ada. Lantas yang terakhir di sini saya mau mengatakan bahwa Bu Siti sudah meneliti nih tentang Facebook, banyak sekali penelitiannya, potensinya besar gitu kalau memang dilaksanakan secara baik. Jadi di sini saya memberikan the so what, lantas apa begitu yang bisa kita lakukan. Misalnya teman-teman dosen, ini adalah peluang penelitian yang menarik sebenarnya karena kita dikelilingi dengan Facebook. Sepanjang kita menggunakan framework atau kerangka berpikir yang cermat dalam hal ini. Di paper saya ada saya sampaikan tentang hal ini dan juga tentang distributed leadership. Ini adalah suatu rancangan penelitian yang sebenarnya saya ingin lakukan karena kalau Facebook itu kenyataannya memang berpotensi, tetapi bisa saja buang waktu karena kalau tidak ada leadership-nya di sana. Tetapi leading dipimpin oleh satu orang itu adalah suatu hal yang menantang. Nah, bagaimana dengan guru? Dari salah satu penelitian saya yang mengidentifikasi grup-grup favorit dari guru dari sekitar 1.000 responden, dan khusus untuk matematika sekitar 400, hampir 500 guru, mereka mengidentifikasi grup favorit mereka. Dan sesungguhnya setiap guru mempunyai grup favorit, dan favoritnya ini karena kemanfaatan dari sisi pengembangan profesinya. Jadi ada banyak sebenarnya grup yang sangat bermanfaat. Nah, secara umum bagi learners atau pengguna Facebook, hal yang perlu benar disadari ya, kalau menurut saya, ini sebenarnya Facebook itu kan creating a history. Jadi semua terrecord gitu loh, semua terrecord. Jadi silahkan berpikir apa sebenarnya tujuan jangka pendek maupun jangka panjang yang bisa saya raih di dalam menggunakan Facebook. Dan yang terakhir, yaitu policy maker, pengambil kebijakan. Sebenarnya pengambil kebijakan juga dengan mudah bisa mengidentifikasi masalah-masalah otentik dari pendidikan, begitu ya, masalah otentik dari pendidikan. Dan ini sebenarnya membutuhkan biaya yang sangat besar, tetapi dengan Facebook itu mudah terdeteksi dan bisa digunakan sebagai ajang untuk merumuskan solusi-solusi. Ada banyak beberapa paper yang relevan yang bisa dibaca berkaitan Facebook, dan saya happy untuk berbagi dengan teman-teman. Saya kira itu yang bisa saya sampaikan. Saya akan serahkan kepada teman. I am just wondering, let me just check because the education attaché actually wanted to join, and I am sure I didn't say anything to Pak Imran. My apologies Pak Imran. Tadi saya mau menyampaikan kepada teman-teman. I just want to tell them about that. A few hours ago, attaché, the education attaché from the embassy wanted to join this one, to join the first hour presentation. So I just didn't notice that. I forgot to say hello to. Teman-teman, saya kira itu presentasi dari UC, dan kemudian saya serahkan kepada teman-teman di Malang. Di sini ada Profesor Hadi, Pak Dekan, ada Prof. Abdul Rahman, sahabat saya, dan juga ada Prof. Purwanto. Bu Desi, saya serahkan ke siapa nggih? Langsung ke Pak Dekan ya.
Ke Bu Latifah dulu, Bu.
Ke Bu Latifah. Oke, terima kasih banyak Bu Latifah. Thank you.
Baik. Terima kasih Ibu Siti. Also, thank you for all speakers from University of Canberra, Professor Barnia Dalgarno, Assistant Professor Siti Patahudin, Assistant Professor Christina Lomaj, Emily Ashcroft, and Ahmad Badrun Kurnia. Before we continue to the next session, atau sebelum kita lanjut ke sesi berikutnya, bagi para peserta dimohon untuk mengisi daftar hadir pada link yang sudah kami tampilkan di layar Bapak Ibu. Silahkan bisa di-capture dulu, kemudian diisi sambil menyimak pembahasan dari Universitas Negeri Malang setelah ini. Ini adalah linknya. Terima kasih. Bu Greda, share screen-nya. Baik, berikutnya adalah pembahasan dari UM atau Universitas Negeri Malang yang akan dipimpin atau dikoordinatori oleh Profesor Purwanto. Tidak menunggu lama lagi, kepada Profesor Purwanto, saya serahkan sesi pembahasan kepada Bapak. Terima kasih. Silakan, Pak.
Thank you, Bu Latifah. Can you hear me? Hello?
Yes, yes, Pak.
Okay, thank you, Bu Latifah. The ones in charge of this discussion section from Universitas Negeri Malang, Ami Purwanto, and Dr. Eri Hidayanto, and Professor Abdurrahman Asyari. Yeah, I think today's topic are very interesting and very useful for development of mathematics education in Indonesia and also for mathematics education research, many research ideas, and I think it's very useful, especially for our students at Universitas Negeri Malang. Yeah. So thanks for all the presenters. What I mainly talk about STEM practice. Yeah, let me take first slide. Yeah, about STEM practice presented by Emily Askov is I think it's very interesting for me, and I think it will be very useful for students, not for lay students, that as they will get curiosity, awareness, and so on. Yeah. I think there are still a lot of research on STEM that need to be done. How to play STEM, how to play to different places and conditions in Indonesia. Yeah, I think Indonesia has many places, different conditions, and how to get teachers willing to play it in the classroom. We have various kind of teachers and what are the results and so on. My question, just question for Emily and Big City and the others. If they are PhD students from Universitas Negeri Malang who are interested in doing research about STEM or about other topics, today topics, can they consult with you about it? Consult to Emil, consult Emily, consult to Siti or others, or maybe they can ask you to, we can ask you to supervise them, or maybe we can do joint research or some other collaboration. Thank you, Bu Siti. That's my question. Hello.
Let me reiterate what Prof. Purwanto said
Yeah.
about the STEM practices topic that Emily presented was very interesting and relevant for Indonesia. So the first question from Prof. Purwanto is the possibility if PhD students in Malang wanted to do this kind of research, can they consult with you, Emily? Can they also even develop like joint research in the future?
I think Emily may have to go for family.
Hi, City. I'll try to help answer there. Emily had to go. She had her baby with her, so. But I would guess that she's probably very open to talking with people. She's very much a collaborative person, so getting in contact with her would be a great first step, and she can continue from there.
Thank you so much, Christina. Jadi pada dasarnya Emily sedang membawa bayinya, jadi dia sedang menjaga bayinya sambil melakukan presentasi ini karena sebenarnya beliaunya cuti ya hari ini, tetapi Emily itu selalu terbuka orangnya, dia sangat kolaboratif dan dia sangat selalu membantu orang, jadi saya kira peluang itu sangat mungkin, Pak, menurut Christina. Terima kasih.
Okay, thank you. Mungkin juga bukan hanya untuk Tristina, mungkin untuk Bu Siti kalau ada yang tertarik, atau untuk dosen yang lain kalau ada mahasiswa kami yang tertarik mungkin bisa minta tolong juga ya Bu ya.
Ya, oke. Dan mungkin salah satu teman-teman yang bisa dilakukan dengan munculnya beliau-beliau di dalam webinar ini, saya kira nama-nama beliau itu gampang ditemukan melalui Faculty of Education, melalui SEG. Di sana ada profil mereka, di sana ada referensi-referensi mereka. So, kalau teman-teman tertarik dengan penelitian, if you are interested in researching something, and let's say, for example, you what I can suggest here is actually to look at our faculty website and to look at the profile of the presenters, and then you can email us if you can't access the papers because it is limited access, for example, in that university. So you can email us, or you can email me. Just email me and give me the papers or the title of the papers of Emily, of Christina. So because I think kalau mau kolaborasi itu tentu perlu tahu lebih mendalam apa yang mereka research, dan caranya adalah kami siapkan akses buat teman-teman. Ya, terima kasih.
Oke, thank you Bu Siti, terima kasih. I think I can pass time for Pak Eri. Saya serahkan ke Pak Eri. Moga Pak Eri kalau ada yang didiskusikan, waktunya sangat pendek soalnya.
Thank you, Mr. Purwanto. I will ask to Mr. Badrun. Thank you, Mr. Badrun. Your presentation is good. I think also new topic to research in Indonesia. Because Mr. Badrun from Indonesia, I can speak Indonesian.
Silakan Bapak.
Oke. Pak Badrun kan melakukan penelitian ini di Indonesia, ya. Literasi statistik. Kemudian dasar Pak Badrun meneliti itu adalah dari hasil PISA. Sementara apakah Indonesian, ya, kurikulum di Indonesia apakah mewadai hal ini Pak Badrun, ya? Karena kalau misalnya siswa ini tidak terbiasa literasi statistik, kemudian diteliti tentang literasi statistiknya, ini satu hal yang mungkin agak mengejutkan bagi mereka. Yang kedua, Pak Badrun, ya, the next task. Jika ini sudah terjadi, ya, sesuai hasil Pak Badrun seperti itu, apa yang harus dilakukan sebagai guru di Indonesia? Ya. What should be done for teachers in school in Indonesia? Thank you for Mr. Badrun.
Ya, sebentar Bapak, saya catat dulu.
Oke.
Ya, terima kasih Bapak Eri, ya. Eri atas dua pertanyaannya. Oke, jadi yang pertama hasilnya kan dasarnya salah satunya adalah PISA. Iya Bapak, tapi ini bukan satu-satunya hasil yang dijadikan dasar untuk penelitian ini. Jadi menemukan bahwa ternyata kemampuan anak dalam merespon soal yang terkait sama data itu ternyata lemah, itu saya baru dapatkan setelah mungkin 6 bulan mencari literatur, dan ternyata juga terkejut juga. Saya pikir awalnya kan PISA secara keseluruhan, tapi ternyata ada report yang khusus di uncertainty sama data. Nah, pertama karena yang lainnya mungkin karena karena jarang, seperti yang Bapak bilang tadi, penelitian ini di Indonesia, dan lebih alasannya kepada semakin ke depan data itu kan sangat dibutuhkan. Segala informasi pasti akan ada menggunakan data di sana. Jika siswa kita nanti saat lulus mereka tidak mempunyai kecakapan dalam merespon informasi yang menggunakan data, maka nanti akan banyak sekali kesalahpahaman, dan ini bahaya. Jadi lebih ke ketuntutan hidup di zaman sekarang, dan ini diperkuat dengan hasil PISA ternyata kita lemah. Makanya kita cari lebih dalam lagi lemahnya di bagian mana. Maka kalau ditanya apakah ini sesuai dengan kurikulum, apakah kurikulum kita memadai ke sana, saya tidak bisa jawab secara langsung. Akan tetap Tapi kalau saya lihat buku-buku teks matematika di kelas yang K13 gitu kan ya, mereka sudah menggunakan apa ya soal-soal yang memancing siswa untuk memunculkan apa ya kemampuan mereka dalam merespon data. Contoh soal yang saya tunjukkan tadi itu bukan saya adopsi dari paper-paper atau yang mungkin tidak ada di Indonesia, tapi buku teks matematika sudah ada di sana. Soal yang sama, tapi saya kembangkan sedikit supaya lebih challenge, menantang untuk siswa gitu. Jadi kalau ditanya apakah kurikulum kita memadai, kayaknya kita sudah melalui apa ya melangkah ke sana dan memang harus ke sana, walaupun harus pelan-pelan. Semoga bisa dipahami untuk yang pertanyaan pertama. Terus yang kedua, apa yang harus dilakukan? Ini bisa jadi penelitian tersendiri, Bapak. Jadi, oke. Framework yang saya tawarkan atau konstruk yang saya tawarkan tadi kan literasi, statistical literasi itu meliputi kemampuan berinterpretasi, kemampuan mengkomunikasikan, kemampuan mengevaluasi, kemampuan mengambil keputusan. Nah, dari sini akan terlihat nanti siswa lemah di bagian mana. Apakah siswa itu lemah di interpretasinya, ataukah siswa itu tidak bisa menginterpretasi tapi ternyata tidak bisa mengevaluasi, atau justru siswa mungkin kesulitan dalam mengkomunikasikan apa yang mereka pahami. Misalnya COVID-19 sekian yang meninggal gitu kan ya dari data sekian yang dites. Nah, mereka paham nggak dengan informasi-informasi ini? Saat mereka mengkomunikasikan, salah nggak? Persepsinya sama seperti berita yang dia baca tidak. Nah, ini yang mungkin sangat dibutuhkan di zaman sekarang. Tidak hanya itu, kan tadi ada komponen. Nah, kira-kira ada 3 komponen, konteks, representasi, sama statistik, pengetahuan tentang statistik sama matematikanya. Nanti juga akan terlihat kira-kira di bagian mana lemahnya anak. Jangan-jangan memang konteksnya anak tidak paham, atau justru konteks paham tapi tidak bisa membaca diagram, atau membaca line graph, atau bar graph, atau misalnya tabel, atau bisa jadi paham itu, tapi ternyata kemampuan matematikanya kurang misalnya. Nah, di situ nanti akan terlihat. Nah, itu bisa menjadi rekomendasi temuan dari penelitian nanti. Seperti itu, Bapak.
Okay, the next time, Mr. Badrun, we can discuss about this.
Ya, terima kasih, Bapak.
Okay, I think enough, Pak Purwanto.
Thank you.
Terima kasih, Pak Eri. Thank you, Mr. Eri. Selanjutnya Pak Sari, silakan Pak Sari, you have about 10 minutes.
10 minutes?
Maaf, ya, okay. Maaf, we have to finish it at 12.
Thank you very much. First of all, thank you very much for the ideas presented today. I am very, very happy. Since I was in charge for studying the ideas related to technological issues, I think we can see there are 3 perspectives that are already presented today. First, from the regular practice of teaching and learning in the classroom. The second one from the professional development perspective. And the third, from educational research perspective. Related to the teaching and polysynchronous learning environments, this is an excellent idea. This is a brand new topic and a new innovation idea for me, especially. And I think most of us in Indonesia, it's a little bit here about this one. Sorry if I'm wrong. This idea, I think, is very suitable for current condition. Learning from home need extra experts to answer students' learning. Answering students' learning is very important. And we need to find ways on how to develop their learning skills. Teaching in polysynchronous learning environments provide us insights on how to help our students to learn. However, I strongly believe that how to implement that in practice, many things we need to consider to make it more effective, more efficient, and others. I see Regelut, for example, say that the outcomes and conditions and methods are very interchangeable. Outcomes and conditions may determine the methods that we need to apply. By the condition and method, we can determine the outcomes. So I think learning is depending on very important thing. For me, learning is depending much on thinking, and thinking is depending much on questioning. I follow Socrates, and so far what we did here actually about the thinking ability and thinking processes. For example, studying about critical thinking ability, critical thinking processes, creative thinking ability, processes, and so far. Therefore, I'm thinking if we can collaborate to conduct research such as type and quality of tasks or questions or learning activities that promote better teacher-student interaction, better learner and learner interaction, better learner and content interaction for critical thinker students, for non-critical thinker students, for potential critical thinker students, I think it will be good idea. What do you think about this one? The first one, related the affordance of social media for teacher professional development. This is amazing ideas. We have been very familiar with the social media, and even we use it almost every day. Everyday life, we use social media, but very rare of us utilize it in our research, especially at UM. The mathematics department, we never know the students that conduct research related with the use of Facebook. Busiti's research provide us insights on how to use social media to improve mathematics teacher competency. Maybe we can collaborate on the use of social media and other platform maybe to promote better teacher in Indonesia, better mathematics teacher in Indonesia. Since the focus of our research mostly on thinking processes or thinking ability, first step that we can do together is investigating thinking processes of our existing teachers if they are given specific tasks or specific questions through social media. Later, we can develop learning modules that are suitable for any type of teachers. Okay. The third one, technological issues, technology in educational research. This is a very good idea. Thank you so much. So far, we just use technology as tools for helping us conducting data analysis. Data analysis for our educational research, such as SPSS and NV4, for example. We did not pay much attention on the use of technology related to the gathering or collecting and managing data. We need to study it a little bit deeper on how to make our research become more sophisticated by using technology. This is a big challenge, and training on how to use technology in educational research are important and really needed. Okay. The conclusion that I can say today, there are a lot of ideas that already in our minds. Many collaborative research agenda are possible. You can sit together online or offline, synchronous or asynchronous, to develop proposal. We can also conduct additional collaborative training to teachers to help them become better 21st century teachers. We are also ready to work together for better teacher education, especially in Indonesian setting. Finally, right now, I always try to encourage the implementation of wiser-oriented instruction. This is a brand new approach for me. wiser-oriented instruction. This is the kind of instruction in which the students are encouraged to have a wandering habits, investigating skills, synthesizing skills, expressing skills, and reflecting habits. We are now working on it. We are now working on how to develop wandering habits of our students, for example. We don't have enough time yet to report the result of the study, but maybe later we can develop another activities too for doing this one. I think that's all that I can say, Pak Purwanto. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Prof. Ashari. Before we before Pak Hadi present or response, maybe it's good for us to invite Barney, Christina to respond because you've been talking really insightful comments, and I think we need to respond it. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, look, I'd like to say a couple of things. I think the points around encouraging students to be critical thinkers is a really important point. And I think one of the dangers of that we face in adopting remote teaching technologies is that even teachers who normally in a face-to-face setting would have their students working in groups on activities where they need to critically engage with the material, sometimes because of perhaps lack of familiarity with the technology or the pedagogies for using remote teaching, they may move to more kind of delivery of information with much less opportunities for students to engage. And I guess my point in relation to polysynchronous learning is to encourage people to think about the affordances of these remote teaching technologies for allowing a lot more learner-learner interaction, learner-content interaction, rather than just learner-teacher. And so the notion that, even though you might be delivering ideas and content, that you will make sure that there are opportunities for students to work together with the technology, facilitated by the technology, to engage in deep discussions with their peers, to really develop those critical thinking skills. So I think it's about learning the pedagogies that the technology affords so that you can go beyond just delivery.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you. Christina, any response or comment?
I think just following on what Barney said, that the fact that we have so many different ways to engage learners, encouraging, again, using some of that data to come in and use that as part of your practice. So look at how are they engaging and using that to then feed back to how you are delivering materials as you go through. That can be a great start to thinking about how you might go further in depth into some of those technologies, is just seeing what you're already using in your teaching practice before you jump into the research aspect.
Yeah, thanks, Christina. And I would like also to say, Prof. Rahman Asari, that actually not only you find this one a new thing about polysynchronous. Actually, this is the first time I use this word, because translating your slides, and I quickly checked Google, what is polysynchronous, and I found the first until 5 lines, Prof. Dalgarno, and then I look at the years, and it's 2014 or 2016. All right, and I think this concept is very important because Indonesian students really enact with this kind of environment, even though they are different technology, because they use social media, for example, delivering things through Google Classroom and using WhatsApp and using Facebook. And then what Barney really emphasized, it's not about technology here. What we really want, it's about the content, the learning, the learning outcomes. Yeah, and thank you so much, Barney. So thank you. So let me now invite Prof. Hadi.
Hello, good evening.
Good afternoon here.
Oh, good afternoon. Sorry. Yeah.
But evening for Christina.
Oh, yeah. Christina,
Yes,
good
thank you.
evening. Okay. This our time for presentation?
I think
Yep.
so, yeah.
Yeah, okay. Sorry. I will share my PowerPoint. Okay. Okay, thank you. I will talk about the future challenges of international collaboration on STEM education research and practices. In recent years, STEM education is the sexiest topics. Many education institutions and policymakers worldwide are pushing for STEM competency improvement to fulfill the demand of today's and future STEM workforces. STEM has become a particular concern of the Ministry of Education worldwide in developed and developing countries, include Indonesia. The development of a STEM curriculum provide opportunities to integrate cross-curricular knowledge and improve inquiry learning, problem solving, and also project-based structure. Developing countries in Southeast Asia, such as Indonesia, Malaysia, and Thailand, are also preparing their young people for literate in STEM to support sustainable development. STEM education is considered necessary for the future of the nation and the younger generation future. So its implementation in schools must be prioritized. Some empirical studies show that STEM education has a positive influence on improving the quality of education. Through STEM education, students can gain valuable interdisciplinary skills and knowledge to solve engineering or technology problems in real life. However, the application of STEM education does not appear to be simple as its acronym. In fact, the critical point of its construction frequently confused and have multiple perspectives. The implementation at the school level has become very diverse and not well patterned. In line with various ongoing programs, STEM publication in various journals continue to increase. During 2013 and 2017, STEM research trends began to emerge and develop. Like the bibliometric result conducted by et al. 2020, the trend of STEM research in Southeast Asia has also increased rapidly over the last 3 years, with Malaysia being the most contributing countries. I have a systematic review in 3 reputable journal, Journal of Research and Teaching, International Journal of STEM, and International Journal of Science Education. I identify the author nationality. The author's nationality quantitatively determine an author contribution in articles, including articles with multiple authors. The author's nationality score shows its author contribution in a publication and can determine which countries are most productive in terms of STEM development. We identify that a few big countries contributed to STEM education development over 5 years. The countries ranked in the top 5 were USA, Canada, Australia, the Netherlands, and the UK. The country with enormous contribution was the USA. The score show that the US's contribution is about 13 times greater than Canada's second place. The 5 countries are also, if my opinion, are also included in the 20 countries with the largest gross domestic products in the World Bank's 2019 version. The USA is the first, Canada in the rank of 10th, Australia 14th, and Netherlands 17th, and England in 6th. When grouped by country of origin, the Americas have the highest STEM research contribution score, followed by the continental Europe, Australia, and Asia. And during these periods, in the 5 years, no contribution were found from countries of the African continent in these 3 journals. In my opinion, collaboration among countries in STEM implementation is urgently needed. International collaboration can expand the scope of research and highlight the impact of research. In addition, there are several advantages obtained, such as increasing visibility, dividing project costs, providing easy access to resources, giving a wider influence by sharing data, and increasing creativity by exchanging ideas. Despite the numerous benefits of international research collaboration, we found a low level of international collaboration between authors. The USA researcher is actively collaborating with other researchers. Some collaboration were found between researchers from the USA and the UK. A researcher collaboration between Israel and Canada, India, Australia, the USA and Canada, the US and Iceland, and the US with Greece, Lebanon, and China. Even though science is becoming more global and the number of international papers co-authors is rapidly increasing, analysis has revealed that actual participation in international collaboration is much lower. The barrier of STEM research collaboration may be several factors, including funding, politics, culture, research ethics, and also language. This review also showed that STEM research has not been evenly distributed, with researchers in Asia still playing a minor role. We know that Asia has abundant natural resources, a high population, and has a policy of developing STEM education. Asian stakeholders must take further steps to improve STEM education. Countries that have implemented STEM in Asia must cultivate publications related to their findings to be studied and adopted by other countries with similar geographic, facility, and cultural characteristics. Collaboration between STEM researchers in Asian countries is essential and need to be improved. The STEM collaboration in Southeast Asia involving has been carried out. This collaboration is in expert exchange, workshop for strengthening STEM education, workshop for teachers, and also joint conferences. This collaboration involving universities in Indonesia, Malaysia, Thailand, Vietnam, Philippines, and Taiwan. We have an annual meeting agenda, which we call IM STEM, International Annual Meeting STEM. This year is the 4th event, which held in August in Taiwan. And moreover, the 5th of IM STEM will head in in our university next year. A collaboration between 2 universities has also been initiated between and University Technology Malaysia in Malaysia. We have a program namely Kids for Education. This collaboration is about how technological research in universities is developed as learning resources for students in elementary and secondary schools. This STEM education collaboration between us is relatively new, and there are still many challenges to be faced, such as the COVID-19 pandemic situation is still an obstacle in this collaboration. And then we identify about the research topics. The result of our review show that the research topics that are most interested in STEM are related to goals, policy, and curriculum, more than 34%, teacher education, 22%, learning context, and culture and social and gender. In our opinion, referring to the implementation of STEM education in Indonesia, some of the essential attributes highlighted to help successfully implement STEM education at the school or in the classroom level. We identify at least some critical points, such as preparing curricula at the national or local level. And the curriculum provides guidance how to implement all the STEM learning in school or in classroom level. The teachers have an essential position in practicing STEM education. Preparing teachers and professional teacher development also needed. The education offices and school provide easily accessible laboratories and STEM learning resources, including the universities maybe. In classroom practice, the teachers apply a technical curriculum through formal and informal learning. Because I saw that the teaching learning of STEM in senior high school is good and informal because we have a barrier about a curriculum of STEM education is not in high school. Government policy must be followed up massively to make clear STEM conceptualization. Teacher organization in Indonesia, we call maybe MKMP or MKMP or kelompok kerja guru, teacher professional development institution such as Universitas Negeri Malang and other education institutes, or education stakeholders and such as PGRI are involved in disseminating practices. And the summary of our presentation that the collaboration of STEM education research will provide valuable hints for providing insight into the effectiveness of STEM education. I offer international collaboration among researchers is minimal, both in developed and developing countries. Cross-country and cross-cultural collaboration are required to enrich and expand STEM findings. We hope that collaboration among researchers also plays an essential role in maximizing STEM research and dissemination. And finally, the UM and UC webinar, I think, provide the future collaborative research in mathematics and science education, enriching and expanding STEM research and practices. I expect that mutual collaboration will occur in current situation, which is facilitated by online media. Last but not least, allow me to give appreciation to Prof. Barney, Ibu Siti Patahudin, PhD, and then Christina, PhD, thank you, Emily, MED, and Pak Hamad Badrun, MSc. I think this second webinar is very constructive and beneficial for all education stakeholders. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Yeah. Saya kira gilirannya Bu Latifah ya, Bu.
Ya, Bu Latifah.
Banyak kan.
Baik, terima kasih. Terima kasih Profesor Hadi atas sharingnya pada hari ini. Karena waktu kita terbatas, Bapak Ibu, sehingga kita langsung menuju ke sesi tanya jawab. Saya sudah mensubmit ini ya, bagi peserta yang ingin bertanya atau mungkin memberikan komentar kepada semua speakers, bisa bertanya melalui chat pada ruang Zoom, Bapak Ibu, atau jika ada yang ingin bertanya secara langsung, Bapak Ibu bisa klik tombol raise hand, sehingga host itu bisa mempersilahkan Bapak Ibu untuk berbicara secara langsung. Silakan Bapak Ibu bagi yang ingin bertanya. Oh, ini ada yang sudah raise hand. Bapak Gilbert Oraple. Halo, Pak Gilbert? Halo? Hai, Pak Gilbert?
Masih unmute?
Ya, ya.
Sorry.
Silakan.
Oke.
Pak Gilbert?
Thank you,
Ingin
Miss
bertanya?
Latifah.
Silakan bertanya langsung.
Wajahnya bisa enggak?
Tidak bisa Pak Pur, karena
Enggak
ini
bisa
web.
ya. Oh ya.
Silakan Pak Gilbert.
Before I want to introduce myself, my name is Gilbert Oraple. I'm a master student in State University of Malang. I have a question for Prof. Dalgarne. I think this discussion is very interesting for increasing my knowledge for my thesis research. Because I also research about blended learning method, and I see polysynchronous, it seems like a blended learning methods. I have a question. First, is polysynchronous same as blended learning? What is the difference between the two? And the second question is how to design and carry out and good evaluation or appraisal for learning with polysynchronous method, because I think the evaluation is not same as the usual learning.
Baik, terima kasih. Thank you, Pak Gilbert Oraple. Professor Barney, you can respond the question from Gilbert.
Thank you for that question. And I would say that there is a similarity between polysynchronous learning and blended learning. I've previously been in a project where we referred to these technology scenarios as synchronous blended learning to differentiate from other forms of blended learning. But I think the notion of polysynchronous goes a step further just because it implies different streams of communication and that mixing of synchronous and asynchronous. So it is definitely in the area of blended learning, but it's a kind of a more specific scenario. Now, in relation to, how to design polysynchronous learning, I think definitely there is work to be done. And I feel as though a really good research topic would be for somebody to explore the fit of accepted learning design frameworks for a polysynchronous context. And I think the much greater opportunity for student engagement leads to a lot of interesting learning design potential.
And maybe one idea can be to look at the framework that Christina presented. How can, for example, you use Picrat to be able to unpack or to design this polysynchronous design?
Interesting. I can't answer that as a yes or a no. I feel like I need to think about that, but that's an interesting suggestion.
All right. So, yeah, there's also another.
Okay. Thank you, Professor Barney and Ibu Siti. There is some question. There are some questions from Mani from the chat. First question is, in a polysynchronous environment, does content structure matter? Do students have more freedom?
Well, I think
Professor Barney can respond this question.
Certainly, thanks, Latifa. Definitely students have more freedom. And I think it creates challenges in terms of the content structure, because if you think about a traditional didactic teaching environment, you are delivering the content in a very sequential way. But if students are able to branch off from that sequential way, for example, by Googling the meaning of a term or engaging in a conversation with a peer, the content structure that you're following as a teacher may not be the structure that the students are following. So I think it does result in some new thinking about the way that we, present content.
Okay. Thank you, Professor Barney. I think that question for Christina already answered by her. So we continue to the next question for Ibu Siti. Is Facebook the right platform? How can educators develop a better strategy in relation to learning structure? You may answer or respond to this question, Ibu Siti.
Yeah, that's a very interesting question. What I've done so far for the use of Facebook, I actually use a virtual ethnographic approach, and what I always think about is the informality of learning through Facebook. So it's like when you do an ethnography, a virtual ethnography, for example, virtual or ethnographic intervention. I try to do it gently. So it is unstructured learning, but this is where I really wanted to explore about distributive learning, because what we need to do is actually how can we continuously lead or leading in different ways, because it is very informal. So I don't know how. So far what I've done, it was using a very informal approach in simulating the conversation through Facebook. It has been an ongoing question for me when I interact with teachers. It is a question for me, is it the time to answer the question, or should I take time to wait for more responses? When is the best time to respond it? How can I stimulate the conversation among them? So it is unstructured. I need more research in this one to be able to exploit the affordances there. Thank you. Hopefully that helps.
Thank you, Ibu Siti, for your response. The next is question from Ibu Luciana. Oh, pertanyaan ini untuk Pak Hadi, ya Bu. Jadi Pak Hadi bisa Ibu Luciana ini mendapatkan langkah-langkah pelaksanaan STEM dalam misalkan pembelajaran matematika di kalkulus integral seperti itu. Monggo Pak Hadi bisa direspon.
Ya, terima kasih Ibu Lucy. Kebetulan background saya bukan matematik ya, background saya sains. Jadi saya tidak punya bahan tentang pembelajaran STEM untuk kalkulus integral. Tetapi kalau kita melihat tadi dari pembahasan-pembahasan yang disajikan oleh para penyaji, bahwa STEM ini sebenarnya adalah interdisiplin, ya. Jadi melibatkan tidak hanya matematik, tetapi juga bidang-bidang yang lain, ya. Saya punya bidang STEM, tapi maksudnya bidang STEM tapi dilihat dari pembelajaran sainsnya, saya belum melihat bagaimana integrasinya kepada kalkulus integral. Terima kasih, Ibu Latifah.
Baik, terima kasih Pak Hadi. Karena waktu kita terbatas, Bapak Ibu, jadi untuk sesi tanya jawab akan saya akhiri sampai di sini. Ada beberapa mungkin pertanyaan yang belum dijawab gitu ya, atau mungkin belum saya sebutkan. Kami mohon maaf karena waktu kita memang terbatas. Our time is limited and we have to end the question and answer session. Ladies and gentlemen, we finally come to the end of the second webinar of the collaborative research webinar in mathematics education by Universitas Negeri Malang and University of Canberra. Before the closing, we would like to say thank you again for all speakers and discussion for today. Professor Barney Dalgarno, Professor Hadi, Assistant Professor Siti Patahudin, Assistant Professor Christina Lomech, Emily Ashcroft, Ahmad Badrun Kurnia, Profesor Purwanto, Profesor Abdurrahman Asari, and Dr. Eri Hidayanto. But before we end the webinar, we would like to take all panelists' picture. For all panelists, please turn the camera on and the host will capture your picture. Mohon Bapak Ibu panelis dan baik speaker maupun discussion untuk menyalakan kamera sehingga kami bisa mengambil foto Bapak Ibu. Bu Krida, apakah sudah siap?
Bu Latifah?
Yes. Ya, Bu Siti.
Sebelum ditutup, mungkin bisa diumumkan mengenai webinar ketiga, di mana kita menyiapkan prize.
Ya, setelah ini Bu akan kami umumkan.
Sebelum foto.
Ya, betul.
Mau foto.
Setelah ini kami umumkan, Bu Siti.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bu Krida bisa dipimpin mungkin?
Ya, silakan dinyalakan videonya Bapak Ibu. Baik, siap-siap kami capture. 1, 2, 3, smile. Thank you. Silakan.
Terima kasih Bu.
Selesai.
Ya. Before I end this webinar, to all participants who have not yet filled the attendance list, please fill it in the attached link on your screen, and we will close the attendance list at 1 p.m. Jadi bagi Bapak Ibu yang belum mengisi daftar hadir, silahkan untuk mengisi daftar hadir pada link yang sudah ada di screen Bapak Ibu. Bisa di-capture, kemudian pengisian sampai pukul 1 ya Bapak Ibu ya, pukul 13 WIB. Baik, terima kasih Bu Krida. I also would like to inform you all that the last webinar will be held on 29th July 2021, and the registration for 3 minutes research presentation competition will be extended to 25th July 2021. So you maybe could see on your screen, we already extended the registration for the competition. Thank you, Bu Krida. We hope that we can see you again, all participants, in our next webinar on 29th of July 2021. Thank you for all participants for your active participation, and also hopefully this webinar will be beneficial for everyone. We will wait for your participation in our next webinar. Thank you all. Good afternoon.
Thank you, everyone.
Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Assalamualaikum.
See you again. Terima kasih Bu Siti.
Terima
Thank
kasih,
you Prof. Bardi.
Terima kasih banyak Prof Hadi, Prof Syari.
3 hari yang lalu.
Bani also knows how. Terima kasih.
Terima kasih.
Yeah.
Terima kasih.
Terima kasih.
Assalamualaikum.
Waalaikumsalam.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi
Terima
wabarakatuh.
kasih Bu Siti.
Ibu Siti,
Ya.
Prof Kolis tidak bisa hadir.
Iya Prof.
3 hari yang lalu, her husband passed away.
Yeah, so her husband, Prof Kolis, passed away, and Prof Kolis also got COVID.
Ya.
Yeah.
Jadi masih di rumah sakit, tapi sudah negatif COVID.
Oh, okay, it's negative now. Thank you so much, and hopefully, she's getting well. Yeah.
Amin.
Yeah. Terima kasih. Stay safe, everyone. Assalamualaikum.
Waalaikumsalam.
Salam. Thank you.
Terima kasih, saya undur diri dulu Bapak Ibu.
Ya, terima kasih Pak Badrun. Terima kasih Pak Dekan, Bapak Ibu, dosen.
Live ya.
Terima kasih.
Sama-sama Pak
Sari,
Sari.
terima kasih.
Thank you for Christina. Oke, sudah keluar.